welcome back to the Pirate Monk podcast. I'm super excited. I think this is the third time we have tried to have our guest on, and we just always end up having to cancel. So I'm excited to have Chad. I think this is a great time because his new book just came out last week, and we want people to know about that. So my friend Chad Robichaux, originally of Louisiana, now living here in California, a veteran, a Marine, a Special Forces guy, a mixed martial artist, but probably more important than that, a man who found that the greatest fights of his life would revolve around his home and his faith. So welcome, Chad Robichaux, to the Pirate Monk podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me on. It's good to finally be on.
Now, where are you living these days?
Well, we live in Southern California in an area called Temecula. So it's kind of you're up in the wine country of Central Coast. We're in the wine country of Southern California, and same beautiful rolling California hills.
Nice. Well, for anyone that gets your book, they're going to get a lot of stories, but give a thumbnail of your story. I know it's totally unfair, but I want people to at least sort of know who they're talking to or listening to this morning.
Yeah, just kind of in a snapshot of my story is, I come from a family of Marines. My son's a Marine. I'm a Marine. My father is a Marine, my father went to Vietnam, came home, struggled like many Vietnam veterans. So grew up in a dysfunctional home, and we had the death of my brother when I was 14 and he was 15 years old. It was a pretty tragic thing in my family. When I joined the Marine Corps at 17, really a brand new chance at life for me, and starting a clean slate. So the Marine Corps was everything I'd ever wanted, and totally embraced it. Became a reconnaissance Marine my first year in, which is the Marine Corps Special Operations Arm, and it was over 10 years later before I actually would ever go to combat. Though I went in 1993, so between 93 and 2003, a lot of things happened. One, I started my family. Married Kathy. We've been married for 22 years now. We have three teenage children. I say teenage, 20, 19, and 17. and so that was the beginning of our family. I spent 4 years where I went off of active duty and became a Marine Corps reservist at 3rd Force Recon. I went to college, was going to come back in as an officer. And during that time, I was a policeman in New Orleans. And then 9/11 happened. And radically changed, I think, everyone in America's life, changed the world. Being in reserves at that time when 9/11 happened, being a Force Recon Marine, I knew that my life was going to be different, and wanted it to. Sought every opportunity to deploy. Went back on active duty, deployed through a JSOC task force that I tried out for and was accepted onto, and did a kind of a rapid rotation of deployments, kind of shorter deployments, but I did 8 of them over 4 years. And it started off. My deployment started off just doing my job, in a very kind of intense level, but really the aspect of spiritual resiliency and spiritual faith was something that was really abstract, I believe, to me being able to do my job as a warrior. I kind of believe that you couldn't, I would have said I was a Christian, but to be this like man of Christianity and morality and all these things in a combat zone, I felt like you had to choose between being a warrior and being this man of God. And so I chose the warrior. It's kind of, for me, it was an obvious choice, and I could do that kind of Christian thing later on in my life. And I believe that absence and void of having a spiritual strength, understanding what true resiliency is, truly, Marine Corps says it, mind, body, spirit. Not having that spiritual strength, I believe it left a gaping hole inside of me and many of our warriors. Many men in this outside of combat that feel like you have to trade your masculinity for your Christianity and believe that lie. And miss the point that there's no greater man, no tougher man, no more courageous and bold man than a man of God, right? To stand up and fight for the things in this world that we should fight for. And I didn't know that. So without that in my life, I feel like I left that again, gaping hole that was filled with like anger and rage and bitterness and just being in a place like Afghanistan, learning about the Taliban, living with the local nationals like I did in my job, and what the Taliban had done to these people. And I began to just have this hate inside of me. And that's how I worked every day. And when that hatred and that intensity started coming home with me, and then my house became a kind of really unhappy place to be. There's a lot of stress in my family, a lot of fear about my behaviors from my wife and children. Eventually, the anger turned into anxiety. I had some very strong physiological symptoms of panic attacks, numbness in my arm, my extremities, and my face, and my throat, and feel like my chest was closing in on me, and just real imminent sense of doom. I didn't say anything at first, and so that kind of isolation from trying to get help, pushing it down, led me to a point to where it was a catastrophic kind of failure. Physiologically, I just crashed, and I was brought home diagnosed with PTSD. Very shamed at that time. Felt like I failed at my job. So I didn't want to talk much about the military. Didn't want to get help. I just went into kind of a deep depression, and I was also scared because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I felt like I was going to die. I mean, the physiological symptoms were so strong, and that led me to kind of immersing myself into something I did my whole life, which was the MMA and jiu-jitsu. I'd already been a professional fighter. And what I found immediately in that was a kind of a gratification, a kind of a redemption of that shame. I was able to kind of mask myself in the masculinity of that, found a lot of success. I became 18-2 as a professional fighter, won a world championship. But all those things, as much as I love jiu-jitsu and MMA, those things didn't change my situation. And in fact, in some ways, it made it worse because it really enabled me and allowed me to not actually get help, to hide from getting help. And so my home was still falling apart. I was still having panic attacks. Just no one knew about it. I hid it really well, and my marriage was totally dead. My relationships with my kids were nothing more than me and my boys being training partners. But as far as being a father, I wasn't doing my role, being in my role as a father or a husband. So I stepped outside of a marriage and betrayed my family into an affair. We sold our home, faced divorce. And it was during that time, and me and my wife were separate, that I realized the damage I had done, and I made a decision to take my life. And yet 20 other veterans a day, make that same decision. I knew my children would probably find me because they were the only ones who could see me at the time, and so I thought that the solution would be to make it look like an accident. And so trying to build up the courage to do this and trying to contemplate how I was going to do it, it was when my wife came to my apartment and, asked me a question that ultimately led me here, changed my life. And she just asked me the simple kind of challenge of how I could do the things I did in the military. She seen me become a recon Marine. She seen me train for these deployments. She seen me train for all these MMA fights and cutting weight and training hard. And she just asked me how I could do all those things. And when it came to our family, that I quit. And so that question was the kind of fork in the road for my life to make a decision that to accept the fact that, I was a quitter. And no more soul-cutting word for me than to be called a quitter.
Yeah.
And to be wrong. I hate being wrong. But, it's both of those things. I quit on the most important things in my life, my role as a husband, my role as a father, to be, that young 17-year-old kid that had a second chance at life and the Marine Corps gave me, and quit on my own health. And so I made a decision that I was going to turn it around. And but I didn't know how. The one thing I did know was that I couldn't do it alone. And I know we're going to talk later about brotherhood, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. I knew I had to get some help. My wife had been going to this church and praying for me this whole time we were separated. She said she was so angry she didn't know how to pray for me. So she said she would just say, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. Let me love Chad the way you love Chad. Let me forgive him the way you forgave him. That's what she would pray for me when I had given up,
Nice.
And so I just asked her, is there someone in this church that can help me with this decision? And she introduced me to a man named Steve Toth. And Steve never served in the military. He was the elder of the church. He was only going to introduce me to another guy who was a Navy SEAL, retired, and a chaplain, and now a chaplain. But when I met Steve, he was just the right guy for the job because he didn't have patience to deal with me. He sat down at Starbucks. I always say his greatest gift is ADD. Like he has no patience at all. Like the guy's like literally, if we go eat at a restaurant, like when we leave and say goodbye, he won't walk to his car. He runs across the parking lot to his car. And, so I'm sitting there with him and I show him my plan that I wrote on paper of how I was going to fix my life. And he didn't even read it. He slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. And it's kind of right. You don't even know me. Like, I put a lot of work into this. It's kind of ruined it. And but he was absolutely right. He said, if it doesn't have anything to do with God, you get it right back on your face. And I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to let you waste mine. And we have a saying we do in our ministry at Mighty Oaks: if what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? I tried the counseling, I tried all the pills, I tried the MMA and jiu-jitsu, and none of those things worked. It changed my situation, so it's time for me to try something different.
So that's an interesting thing with Steve. Did you have misgivings because you knew he wasn't initiated the way you had been initiated? He wasn't a military guy. What would he have to offer? Or were you just so desperate?
Yeah, when I was particularly when I was deploying, I was not only it was just my mentality at the time. The only people I hung out with were people from our task force. So it was other like special operations guys. And I think I just like at the time my life was so regimented, deploying, coming home, recovering, training for the next deployment, going again. I didn't really allow anybody else into my life. So I became really regimented towards hanging around guys I worked with. And then when I transitioned from that to MMA, it was either former guys of that type, like kind of military, kind of alpha military guys, particularly like special operations guys that I knew for years that I trusted, or other guys from MMA and jiu-jitsu. So I'd always been kind of regimented on who I would allow into my life. And so Steve was the first person, I think, outside of that in my adult life that really allowed access to my life. And that was going outside of my comfort zone, because it wasn't, it never was the issue of because I'm come from this background, I'm like better than these guys. And it was never about that for me. It was trust. Like I don't trust people. I'm a skeptic by nature. I feel like I always felt like very cynical towards the world. And so I just didn't trust people. So if I didn't know you came from that background and ever kind of earned a status towards, some type of a status in life because of the hardships or, something you've overcome, then I really didn't trust that person. And that just kind of was my mentality at the time. So Steve was me trusting Steve was a big step for me. And, but I thank God I did, because what he offered me essentially was like, not only to introduce me to encounter with Christ, but he mentored me for a whole year of biblical manhood. And when I look back at that, my life and the things that I'm proud that I achieved in my life, but really it's also a little bit disappointing as I look at my life, because I look at achievements, and all those achievements that I did in my life, they're really a kind of a list of things that I was discontented with. I achieved one thing and then it wasn't enough, so I had to do something else. Right. It was just kind of this path to try to put my finger on something that I felt was missing, and I never could find it. And what Steve introduced me to was what I had been looking for my whole life, and that was being the man that God created me to be.
So let's start with that. We were going to start with another question, but let's talk about manhood and what you learned about. You had been a part of what most people would say is some of the most manly stuff around. You're in the military. You're doing all these big things. You carried a gun. There you go. It's already manly. But yeah, because it takes a real man to have the pink water bottle. So what did he teach you that you were surprised, like, oh man, I missed this. I didn't get this when I thought that just blowing something up was the most manly thing I could do?
Honestly, I believed that Christian men were weak. That's what I saw modeled in the churches I went to and places I went. I saw, guys being drugged in the church on Sunday by their wives and saying yes, ma'am, and following a set of rules and submitting, and that just wasn't me or something I aspired to conform to. I just didn't see that masculinity, and I believe that's a lie that men, not just military men, that men in general believe of the enemy to demasculate us from our proper role that God created us to be as warriors and leaders. And so when Steve kind of unwrapped and peeled back the veil and said, hey, Christian men aren't weak. In fact, there's no one bolder, no one more courageous, no one more equipped to fight with this world's battles than men of God. And I realized that, and then not only realized that for myself, but started reading and going through lessons and stories of biblical characters, real life biblical characters that have persevered the most incredible lives, selfless lives, warriors' lives. I'm like, oh my gosh, like why? For me, it was like I was kind of upset that no one had shared this with me. And I'm like, at this age of my life, no one's ever shared this with me. My whole life I've been chasing this. And when I discovered it, it not only brought like a restoration in my own life and family, but this PTSD thing, it was like I was dying like of cancer, and this guy gave me the cure to it. Like I wanted to share with every other man I knew, because this was the solution. This was the solution to the problems I had faced. And not only did I find like the restoration, but I also felt like I found what I craved most in my life, and that was the purpose in my life. And I think that's what most men that I work with now feel like they struggle with the most is purpose. What am I here for? I always quote Mark Twain, right? The two most important days in a man's life is the day he's born and the day he finds out why. Like when I discovered like what Steve was sharing with me about, being a man of God, I felt like that's when I really discovered why I was here. And ever since then, I've been trying to share that with every other person that listened to me.
What do you say? Because we've got an idea of manliness that's attached to a machismo kind of concept, which there can be very manly things that are just macho, but that can also mask, like you did a lot of manly things while avoiding the responsibilities of being a good husband and father, which is wrapped up. You weren't being a complete man at that point,
right?
But you were chasing the idol. But then I also know, and this isn't a knock on what's his name, Wild at Heart man.
Yeah, John Eldridge.
Yeah, Eldridge. I know a lot of folks that have been really impacted by him speaking into it's okay to be a man in these ways. But I've also known guys that are more creative, that have no desire to watch sports or go hunt an animal and skin a deer and eat the flesh of their kill. And when they read that book, they felt like, oh, well, damn, I guess I don't get to be a man.
Right.
So they were missing the other part of like, okay, it's not just the macho thing. So what would you say to a person like that says, I'm never going to be a recon Marine or a fighter? So am I just out?
Man, that's really awesome you asked that question, because I spoke at a men's event last night, and the guy waited to the very end. I mean, I must have been there 2.5 hours after the men's event. Guys coming up to talk to me, and a few guys had stayed at the end to pray. And there's always that one guy that waits last for everyone to leave, and that was that guy. He said, I feel like I was created for something more. I want to be a warrior. I've always aspired to be, but I've never joined the military, and I don't plan on ever doing it. So where does it leave me? Yeah, that's kind of his question. Am I a warrior? Am I a man? And that was the exact question he had. And so I was able to talk through it with him, and we even prayed together about God revealing, what battles he used to fight. Because being a warrior doesn't mean every warrior fights the same battle. We don't all pick up a battle axe and run in the front line. But God has a different fight for each of us, and we are all created, for a unique battle and John Eldridge kind of talks about, a role in that, but what that battle looks like may not be what you think it looks like. It could be, it could be for being that leader in your church or your community or something that may not look so bravado to the world. And that's okay. That's just fine. I mean, this world needs warriors of all types. If we're all the same type of warrior in the military, I always hear guys, I come from a special operations community, but it amazes me sometimes when you hear guys, everyone in Vietnam was a sniper or a Navy SEAL. Like, man, who's running the supply chains? Like, how did anybody get anything done? We all have different types of roles in battle as warriors, and not everybody's on the other side of M4 putting rounds downrange. So I mean, and that same is in life. Just because you're not in the military, just because you're not out, like John Eldridge hunting elk, and that doesn't make you less of a man. That doesn't make you not a warrior. There's important fights in this world that need to be fought, again, within our homes, within our communities, within our churches, within this country. And it requires men of courage and boldness to stand up, and they don't have to have 30-inch biceps to do it.
Yeah, that's good.
They just have to have the heart of God to be a warrior who has the courage to stand up for the things in this world that only men of God are going to stand up to.
It makes me think of your relationship with Steve, how on paper he wouldn't have been the one that you would have picked to have helped you, But he was the right man for the job. But he would have been the absolute wrong man for somebody else to have pushed back the paper and said, I don't even want to look at your plan for how you're going to fix this. Would have crushed someone else. It was exactly right for you. But possibly a guy who was less intense and knew how to hug another man and be soft with him would be the exact right guy for someone else. So even if someone doesn't have the exterior facade of toughness and sergeant, he can still be the exact right person another man needs at a certain season in his life.
That's right. You know, me and Steve, we're still very close, and we talked about this just recently. And you know, like God knew exactly who He was putting across that coffee table for me. But at that time in my life, and probably most of my life, I'm extremely manipulative. So I could have said all the right things, tell him everything he wanted to hear. And if he would have played it along, I probably would have never been challenged and never changed, because I was prepared to do that. I was prepared to say everything I wrote in that paper was everything anybody would have wanted to hear. But it wasn't the things that actually were at the core level going to make me make tough changes. And he wasn't willing to hear it. He wasn't even interested in hearing it. And, you know, he had what I didn't know at that time was that Steve had mentored a guy 6 months before me who was struggling with suicide, and Steve was weak with him. Steve didn't challenge him, and the guy took his life. And so I'm the next guy down the pipe after this guy killed himself that Steve's mentoring. I don't even know this backstory, and Steve's like, "Hey, I'm not going to play around with this. I have to be bold. I have to stand up. This is going to be hard." He even said he was a little bit intimidated by me but he just knew that God had put him there for that very moment, for that battle, to be the warrior for that battle, and to stand up courageously against me and shut me down and tell me the things I needed to hear. No one in my life at that time was telling me what I needed to hear. People were just telling me everything that I wanted to hear. And
Nate, does this remind you of your first sponsor? I don't know. As Chad's talking, it sounds like all your stories. Is it the same guy? Is he just everywhere?
Yeah, and I think that's part of kind of an experienced mentor or sponsor. I find that the longer I'm around and trying to help guys with the struggle that mirrors mine, the crankier and more impatient and pushier I become. And I do remember when I was struggling with sobriety early on and spinning sponsors like they were tops and pretending to have a sponsor but being my own sponsor. Somebody finally told me, if you really want to get sober, Nate, you're going to have to find a son of a bitch to be a sponsor. And I finally found a son of a bitch. Yeah.
Well, on that note, transitioning. And by the way, this is all descriptive, friendly listeners. This is not prescriptive. If you found that you're a kind person, you may remain a kind person tomorrow. Nate Larkin told me I had to be a son of a bitch, so here I go.
No, but it is the courage to tell the truth, and you can tell it softly sometimes, but sometimes you're just going to have to figuratively put a guy up against the wall for his own sake.
Yeah,
and if you're lucky, sometimes you have to do it literally. So let's
I'm not that guy. No.
Let's shift gears for a second and talk about brotherhood. Obviously, that's hugely important to us here on the Pirate Monk podcast, and you have experienced a lot of different lessons from military and especially small groups that you would work with there, training in the martial arts. So I want to talk about the out-of-church lessons you had, both good and bad, that we can draw from in the church that maybe we don't hear from a pulpit.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about brotherhood and military all day long because, when you're working in small, special operations teams, particularly when you're working remotely with little support, the guy to your left or right is, it's not just mission success, it's life or death, so it's extremely important. You have the right guys there, guys you trust, guys you know, when you walk in that room, you don't have to look over your shoulder to know they're going to be there. You already know they're going to be there.
Okay. So pause right there on it. Already, I feel like this is going to be hard because you have community built on the reality of the desperate importance of trusting the people around you. Whereas in the church, you know what? I hope to have a few good friends, but if not, I'm just going to go home and have a beer and watch a football game anyway, so I'll move on. So, man, that's how do you even get to that mentality when you're not in that situation?
Well, I mean, so you take it off the battlefield, right? You go into an MMA fight. I'm preparing for an MMA fight. I don't want my friends in my corner. I don't want the guys who are going to just clap really loud when I'm in my corner. I want the guys who are going to give me the right advice. Like I am in the middle of round two, and I'm dropping my left hand and getting tagged in the face. I need somebody to tell me, "Hey, dummy, pick your left hand up." I need a guy who can spot that and have the knowledge to tell me to do that. The guy to tell to coach me through the hard times. And so, how do you get the right guys in your corner? You don't just show up on fight day and they just show up there accidentally. You're intentional about it. Right, I'm preparing. I'm coming up with a strategy to win this fight. So I'm not picking my friends. I'm picking the right guys, the right striking guy, the right wrestling guy, the right guy that has the voice to motivate me in those fights. I'm picking those guys and being intentional about it. We're training together. So when the day of the fight comes, we're in one, and that's why I love MMA, because it's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. Mm-hmm. Just as a fighter, you get to go out and represent that team. But it's a team effort to go out and win that fight you prepared for. And life outside the church, in the church, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. If you're going to face the battles of this world and the fights of this world, you better be intentional and prepared for those battles. And being intentional, being prepared means having the right guys in your corner when you get in those fights. And don't wait till you're in a fight to figure that out and for everyone just to miraculously show up. You're intentional about it. Right now in my life, ever since Steve stepped in my life, I realized the importance of having cornerman, brotherhood, accountability. And so, man, I don't trust myself. I'm a degenerate by nature. And so I will not ever allow myself to go through life without the right accountability. I'm surrounding myself with accountability, and checks and balances to make sure I don't ever sabotage my own life again. And I don't wait till I'm in a bad situation to figure that out. I plan ahead. Like if I have a trip that I'm going on, a speaking trip, and I'm going off to speak, and the church only wants to pay for the church I'm going to speak at. It can only afford to pay for one ticket. I don't travel by myself. Mm-hmm. I don't wait till I'm alone in a hotel room and letting my mind wander and get myself in a bad situation. And I know a lot of pastors might be like, "Oh, why? I can't believe you said that." Well, they're the same ones that's going to end up in some kind of trouble later on because they didn't put those balances in their life and their accountability in their life.
That's right.
I just put a lot of precautions in my life. I think about the things in advance. I plan for those battles ahead, and I put the right guys in my corner. And if you're a man and you think, well, I don't have any friends like that, I don't have anyone you trust like that, man, that should be like the first and most important priority in your life is surrounding yourself with those guys. And they're out there. You just have to be intentional about finding them. I go to these men's events and speak at these men's events all the time. And that's like one of the biggest messages that pound home. Like, where do you find men like that? In the church, right there in those men's groups in those church. Find guys like that and seek out that kind of brotherhood and accountability to guys that you can tell anything to, no matter how embarrassing it is, no matter how shameful it is. Because if you can't have people you can talk to about the struggles that's in your heart, then you're going to end up acting on those struggles. And you should have someone in your life that you can trust and be accountable and transparent with. And it's very important for me in the battles that I know that I'm going to face in my life. And I don't think I'll ever go through life without that kind of brotherhood around me.
So one thing that's probably important, and I love fighting metaphors. I think fighting metaphors just work for everything. So we can just stick with that. But you're talking about, okay, I need a team. I need a corner man. I need my grappling guy. Each of those people know they're that guy. It's not like your jiu-jitsu training coach or partner shows up and they're confused because they thought they were supposed to be working on like Thai kicks today. They know I'm the grappling guy and he's leaning on me and I'm watching and helping. When it comes to relationships in our lives in the body of Christ, we are not nearly as aware or specific about what we're asking for or what our role is in someone else's life. And when you were saying that, I remember a pastor friend of mine. I was young in marriage. I was probably like 25 going through some really hard stuff. And I sat down with him and told him the whole thing. Like, here's all my secrets. And in my head, I felt like, all right, I'm making you my partner. And now you're going to call and ask me how it's going and check in on me, all that kind of stuff. And he never brought it up again. And I was so disappointed in him. I'm like, you failed me. I gave this thing to you, you failed me. Years later, I realized how stupid. I never asked for any of those things. I just dumped a bunch of secrets on him and then said, so we're all clear about what your role is and my role. And the reality was, I can now see after that conversation, he was totally available for me to go follow up with that. And if I had asked him specifically, hey, I kind of need you to just check in on me every once in a while, and maybe I'll want to pull away, so I'm going to tell you how I'm going to try to sabotage it. But just a lack of clarity, I think, makes it not effective like it is in the martial arts example.
Yeah, I think having very meaningful relationships is the start of that. Like, not just, it's, like I use Jeremy Stolnecker, for example. Like we have, he's not just accountability. We have a relationship with him, a very close relationship with him on a continued basis. And I think it's important to have you don't just meet with somebody during those hard times and during those struggles. You're intentional about blocking time out of your schedule just to meet. And men have a hard time with this, right? We have to meet around social gatherings, like, hey, let's get together for a football game, or let's get together for to do an event, instead of just getting together and spending time together to build a relationship with one another. Girls do that, but guys don't typically do that. And I think it's important. I have a few guys in my life that I have relationships with, and when it comes to those times, it's easier to talk about those things. And it's also because of that relationship, we check on one another. Talking about this, I have my first platoon sergeant, my first recon platoon sergeant. His name was Frank Brickey, and he told me this kind of methodology of training and preparation, and he called it plus minus equals. I took it from the Marine Corps into MMA and now into life. And plus minus equals means you always train with someone who is better than you. The plus, they're going to push you to achieve greater heights. They're going to challenge you. They're going to hold you accountable. You train with someone equal to you, because that peer-to-peer kind of push, just like we're walking and you walk faster, I walk faster, next thing you know, we're running, that kind of grows you as well. And then you have someone minus, like less than you, that you could hone your skills on because you're a little bit better than them, but you're also mentoring them as well. And that's really served me in MMA, like to be able to train with somebody I could beat and work on my technique, someone that beats me, pushes me better, someone equal to me, so I got these wars with. And then now in life, I try to use that same methodology to where I always have people on my peer level, but I always have someone I'm mentoring and someone mentoring me. And I try to do that in every area of my life. I do that as in my pursuit of being a man that God created me to be, that manhood pursuit. And I do that in my marriage too. So me and my wife always have a couple that we're mentoring, and we always have a couple older than us that are mentoring us we can lean on. And that plus minus equal rule, I think, is very important. But again, like you said, those people don't just pop up. They're not just going to participate just because you kind of pie in the sky thought about that. You have to be intentional about that and let people know that you're actually doing it with them, right? You can't just expect them to.
So tell me about how you transitioned. Or Nate, did you want to follow up on any of that before I ask my Warrior Oak question?
No. I just want to say this is fantastic. I mean, I love to see how these principles that we know gut level are true. I had no idea that MMA was a team sport. I had no clue. But to see that the same principles that work in my very non-MMA life function in Chad's life is amazing. This is great.
I remember something, it just broke my heart at the time and has haunted me ever since. The guy that trained me in Los Angeles in the early 90s really had a heart to share Christ with the folks we were working with. And at the time, they were just some of the best in the world at the beginning of the UFC. And they were so reticent to hear about becoming a Christian. One, because they thought Christians were weak. Mm-hmm. But two, because, and what was the exact words he said? He said, they have more brotherhood and vulnerability in training than the church can ever offer the way it is. So wow. I have trouble communicating what is there for them to come into. And I was like 18, 19 at the time. And I was like, oh, this is horrible. And yet I get it, because when you're training, it is such a team thing and you're so vulnerable. You know, if you say, hey, we're just hitting at like 60% working on techniques, and someone loses their head because they're out of control, then you're in danger. And add sticks or knives to that mix, and there's so much trust that isn't natural in the church. We're not forced into it because no one's trying to punch us in the face. Maybe that's what we need in the church. Just a deacon who walks down the aisles and occasionally comes up and just, grabs you in a rear naked choke or punches you in the face, and you just got to be ready. Then we'd trust and love each other more. So tell us about the Warrior Oaks program, because you learned all of this and had a heart to serve other veterans with it. Oh,
Mighty Oaks, right?
Mighty Oaks.
Mighty Oaks Warrior programs. Yeah, it's it's really, we didn't, when I started Mighty Oaks, and Kathy and my wife and I started it, we didn't say, hey, it'd be a great idea to start a veteran nonprofit. That wasn't it at all. We just we want to take the challenge that Kathy gave me, the mentorship Steve gave me, and the second chance that God gives us all, and just pay that forward, even to one other person. And that's all it was ever meant to be. It was just a deep, not desire, but almost like an obligation, like inside of me. Like I felt like I discovered this, like I said earlier, right, that Steve gave me. I was dying of cancer, and Steve gave me the cure. Like I had to share it. I didn't want to share it. I had to. And, especially when I discovered that I wasn't the only one. A lot of times when we struggle, we think we're the only one, right? Mm-hmm. And so I thought, no one can be struggling like me. No one can be wanting to take their life like me. No one can be facing divorce. And obviously a lot of other people are. 22 suicides a day from the veterans. The divorce rate right here at Camp Helen, where I am, is 85%. So
85% of returning veterans end up getting divorced.
Yeah, every base is different. Camp Helen is where we are right now. That's the rate there. So, a lot of other people were struggling, and I felt like I had this answer, this solution, and I want to share it. And so me and Kathy made a decision, a very bold decision. People thought we were insane, but we walked away from kind of everything in our life to start this. We didn't have any idea what we were doing, and never thought we'd end up where we are right now. But God has provided the most amazing team to come around us. We run about 30 programs a year, 6-day programs, and we get active duty military on orders plus veterans. We've spoken to hundreds of thousands on bases and spiritual resiliency, and then we have had 1,400. This Friday will be 1,446 graduates from our legacy program, which is our core program, and zero suicides from that.
Zero suicides. Wow! And you're dealing with people they're talking about that. Can you give us? I'm watching the clock right now because I know you got your next deal to get to. But for we who aren't in your world, what are we supposed to understand about PTSD? We hear about it, but what is it exactly?
Well, I think PTSD has kind of become almost a buzzword with veterans who go to combat, and the truth is, combat or Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, or just life, right? We all face hardships in this world, and understanding, how to respond to trauma and understanding the way God created us, I think, is a really important aspect of PTSD. I hate the word disorder, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, because it truly is a conflict of terms. The clinical definition is the body's normal response to an abnormal situation. As someone that believes I was created, and my body's responding normally to an abnormal situation, well, I'm not disordered at all. My body's doing exactly what it was created to do in order to survive. And so I don't need 30 pills a day to numb myself to get past that. I just need to understand how God created me, that yes, I did experience trauma, that yes, when I see things that are going to relate me to that trauma, I may feel anxiety and some of these physiological emotions, but the body is in a process of healing itself. And I think through understanding trauma, understanding how God created us, not saying that medicines are, totally irrelevant. And I believe there is a need for some medicines, but I believe there's much more to it than clinical methods being the only solution. And so when we deal with PTSD at Mighty Oaks, we give that alternative solution. We say, hey, you've been through some hard things. But the reason you're in a situation you're in isn't because some traumatic event or even some heroic event that happened to you in Iraq, Afghanistan, or childhood. The reason you're in the situation you're in, and this kind of rock bottom place in your life is because of choices you made in response to that. And you never lost control of that. And you have the ability to choose differently moving forward. And that's where the faith-based model comes in. We give them the kind of a blueprint of choices based on biblical manhood, or for the ladies program, to being the women they were created to be, and then provide a network of accountability into that. And when we see people really come to that position to accept responsibility and not let their past define their future, and say, hey, I can take this fork in the road and go towards take a path towards hope and purpose, and actually the very purpose that God created me to live, then we see guys get their lives back under control and actually rise up beyond the circumstances of being a victim or someone diagnosed with a disorder, and being the people and the warriors that God created them to be. And it's really been amazing to watch it unfold at Mighty Oaks, and see these guys not just not kill themselves, but actually step up and be the warriors and leaders that we know they are. So that's what Mighty Oaks has been about. It's definitely a discipleship program. All of our leaders are guys who've been through the program, and they're paying it forward just like I did. And that's been one of the reasons it's grown so quickly. And we're become a top resource for the military. I speak at Marine Corps Boot Camp every quarter. We've written several books and resources that we give out. We've given out a Path to Resiliency, Spiritual Resiliency book. We give out at Marine Corps Boot Camp. We've given out 25,000 of them now. And it's been amazing.
All right, so how do people get these resources? If they want to check you out before we let you go, how do they get your books? How do they check out the Mighty Oaks Warrior Program?
Well, our website's mightyoaksprograms.org. On the website, you can learn about our programs, which are all free, by the way, to active duty veterans and veterans who are out of the military, free to spouses. We even cover travel. And so we haven't charged one veteran of those 1,400 to ever come to our programs. All our books are on the website. So we have several books. I have a marriage advance book, which is my wife and I's marriage testimony. We have spiritual resiliency books. We have a PTSD book coming out in 2 months. And then we have a leadership book coming out next month by Jeremy Stolnecker. And then my newest one is An Unfair Advantage, which you guys just read.
Yep.
And so all those resources are on our website. Again, programs are free. If anyone wants to support the programs, right, they're not free. They're free to the veteran, but they're not free. So we love people that want to help contribute and support to make it possible. So that you could support and donate there as well.
How much does it cost to put one veteran through?
As an organization, it costs us about $2,500. However, we have a scholarship fund, so $1,000 scholarships a guy off our list into the program.
All right, so that's what if people think, all right, I didn't go and serve in those ways, but I want to serve a man or a family who did. There you go.
Yep.
All right.
Save their life and change the world.
Chad, you are right up against your deadline, so get out of here. Thanks for hanging out with us. It was good to see your face.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
God bless you. Thank you.